I believe funeral customs of the ancient Egyptians is a topic that is important for us to understand the history of because of the rituals concerning death and the soul's journey to the afterlife. According to the historian Brunson, eternity was the common destination of each man, woman, and child in Egypt, but not eternity as in an afterlife above the clouds, but rather an eternal Egypt which mirrored one's life on earth. The afterlife of the ancient Egyptians was the field of reeds, which was a perfect reflection of the life one had lived on earth. As a Christian, the afterlife is so much more than how the Egyptians viewed it. I believe eternity certainly is the common destination of each man, woman, and child. However, I have been taught that eternity is life in heaven with Jesus. Some people believe their works will get them to heaven, but I believe one must live for Jesus and give their heart to Him in order to spend eternity in heaven. I believe everyone will have an eternity either in heaven or hell, depending upon the things you do in your life and whether you strive to live for Jesus. Egyptian burial rites were practiced as early as 4000 BCE and reflect this vision of eternity. The earliest preserved body from a tomb is that of so-called Ginger, discovered in Gebelen, Egypt, and dated to 3400 BCE. The ancient mummy, known officially as Gebelen Man, was discovered in 1896 when local archaeologists offered the body for sale. Sir E. A. Wallace Budge of the British Museum traveled to Egypt and brought the corpse and several others, of whom one was nicknamed Ginger. Burial rites over time between c. 4000 BCE, but the constant focus was on eternal life and the certainty of personal existence beyond death. This belief became well known throughout the ancient world via cultural transmission through time and mode to influence other civilizations and religions. It is thought to have served as an inspiration for the Christian version of eternal life and a major influence on burial practices in other culture. The rituals of the ancient Egyptians are also important in today's funeral customs. How a body was preserved back then and how it is preserved today is very similar. After a person had died, the family would bring the body of the deceased to the embalmers and pick which 3 levels of quality and price in Egyptian burial the family wanted, and the embalmers would proceed from there. The 3 choices included what type of coffin the loved one would be buried in, what funeral rites were available, what treatment the body received, and examples included dress, mummification, etc. This ritual is somewhat like today's treatment of the deceased. You may spend as little as you would like, or you may spend as much as you can. Some families choose not to embalm while others do embalm. Some choose cremation, and some have funerals and memorial services while some do not. As in Egyptian days, the mummified deceased of ancient Egypt and few other aspects of this great culture have attracted as much attention. A common misconception should therefore be put right at the onset. Even though the number of surviving mummies is large, most ancient Egyptians were not mummified. This treatment was reserved for the small upper classes, and it was abandoned as pagan practice when Egypt became Christianized. A body was probably treated as it would be today. It was cleansed and wiped and wrapped in short clothes or a shroud and laid to rest in a grave where it decayed and left few traces. Prevention of the corpse was linked to the Osiris cult. This, like other national cults, seemed to have affected the populace, which put its reliance on intimately known local deities, but little and remained a religion of elitist upper class. According to the myths, the god body had been dismembered, but Isis had reassembled all the body parts and Osiris had been revived. Rituals of burial and passage into the afterlife were based on the resurrection myth, which until the 6th dynasty were applied to the pharaohs only, then increasingly to his family, the aristocracy, and from the Middle Kingdom on to any who could afford them. Osiris is a god associated with Egyptian burials and deaths that is recognizable because he is wrapped like a mummy. Appropriate because he was the god of the dead and the ruler of the underworld. Deceased Egyptians could expect to meet Osiris as they passed through the underworld on their way to eternity. He was also the god of fertility and resurrection, because with the help of his wife Isis, he was able to come back to life after being killed by his brother. The major impact on the funeral industry as far as how the Egyptians prepared the deceased and how we prepare the deceased today is very similar. Anubis is the god of embalming. The Egyptians believed that the god of the deceased needed to be preserved so that the soul could recognize it after death. The Egyptians referred to its mummification, but today embalming is probably one of the most important funeral customs of the ancient Egyptians. The way bodies were preserved and the way they are preserved now has certainly had an impact on the funeral industry today.